What's up, people, and welcome back to camp. My name is Mark Gagnon, and thank you for joining me in my tent where every single week we explore the most interesting, fascinating, and controversial stories from all time forever. Yes, that is what we do here in the campsite. We go down crazy rabbit holes and all sorts of left and right turns to figure out what's really going on. And I just want to say a few things up top before we dive into this episode, which is a banger. I just want to say thank you so much to you for tuning in and commenting and engaging with the content. Every time a video pops up on YouTube or Spotify and you click on it, it helps everything happen. Like, it literally keeps the lights on here in the tent, keeps the fire burning, and it takes care of Christos' hat collection. Right, Christos? Love you guys. Yep, appreciate you. Now, I just want to say a few things up top. This is a wild one. If you're not familiar with the lore behind Eyes Wide Shut, behind what the movie is, behind Kubrick and his death, sort of suspiciously or not so suspiciously after the movie aired, and kind of what it says about like elites and all sorts of stuff, this is a deep rabbit hole. And we're probably not going to be able to hit everything today, but oh boy, I'm going to try my best, okay? This is like kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to like crazy Hollywood conspiracy stuff. It's my mom who was like, you need to watch this movie when I was like 12. And I watched it when I was like 18. And I was like, this is kind of graphic. She was like, yes, but it's the elites. You waited 6 years after she told you to watch it? Yeah, I actually lied. I think I watched it when I was like 25. Wow. Yeah, I never got around to it. But it's a wild movie, and no one's seen the actual cut. I should say no. But the full cut.
Well, the one that has is no longer with us.
God rest his soul.
We'll get into it.
Where does it start? 1926. Way before Eyes Wide Shut was ever a thing. There's an Austrian writer named Arthur Schnitzler. I can't start off the episode and talk about Arthur Schnitzler without talking about that.
Makes me hungry.
That sounds kind of delicious, right? A little Schnitzler you are. Now, he publishes a novella called Traumnovelle. And in English, it literally means dream story. And it's set in like a turn-of-the-century Viennese carnival. And it tells the story of this doctor named Fridolin, whose wife confesses this sexual fantasy that she had about another man. And he's not able to get over it. So, he spends a single hallucinatory night wandering around the city, and eventually he stumbles into the secret gathering at a private mansion. And it's all masked. Everyone's wearing these strange face coverings. It's very ritualistic and extremely sexual. And the society realizes that he doesn't belong there, so they threaten him. But a woman sacrifices herself to save him, and he escapes. And then the question hangs on him forever, was any of this real? And that feeling right there, like, is this real or not, is important because it's not just about the plot. It's about what the book is really doing. This book, at its core, is a psychological novel. It's about male insecurity and sexual paranoia, and it's about the way a husband's ego can kind of create this universe out of a single sentence that his wife says about a dream she had. And Schnitzler was writing in the same Vienna at the same time as Sigmund Freud. This is explicitly a book about what the subconscious does when it's threatened. And think about that, because that's going to come up later. Now, Kubrick actually read this book, Traumnovelle, in like 1968, 69-ish. And he was like 39 years old, and he had just finished doing 2001: A Space Odyssey. He was, at that moment, arguably the most respected filmmaker alive. And he bought the film rights to Schnitzler's novella, like, on the spot. He, like, called up his agent and was like, I need this. And then he sat on it for 30 years. Reportedly, he considered making the story like funny, like comedy with Woody Allen, which would have been ironic, needless to say.
Probably a masterpiece.
Yeah, it would have been funny,
Yep.
But it would have been a very coincidental. And he also considered Steve Martin, and then Tom Hanks, and Dustin Hoffman, and Bill Murray, and all these people. And every decade, he'd kind of pick the project up, and he'd look at it, and put it back down, basically being like, yeah, this isn't ready. And wildly enough, it wasn't until 1994, 26 years after he read the book, that Kubrick finally hired a co-writer, a British novelist named Frederick Raphael, and began the adaptation that would eventually become Eyes Wide Shut. And the changes that he made to the story are very important, because Kubrick didn't just translate Schnitzler's novella into a screenplay. He really interpolated it. He transposed it into something new. And he moved the setting from the 1900s in Vienna to the 1990s in New York City. He changed the time frame from, this carnival, a centuries-old religious festival, to Christmas, a centuries-old religious festival based in America. And that's not like a little shift. Like, the story was about this, bourgeois anxiety at the edge of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's collapse and all that stuff. Kubrick's version became something different and a lot more focused. It's a story about, like this, late capitalist kind of consumer malaise where, the sacred ritual of the West, which is Christmas, is now replaced with shopping and sexual exploits, and the ancient traditions of, the masquerade are now replaced by like this modern wealthy class kind of ritual, you could say. Now, the most interesting thing about Kubrick's research on this was just the amount of work he does for every film. On Barry Lyndon, he used lenses originally designed by NASA for the Apollo moon missions to shoot by candlelight. When he did The Shining, he would read like every book he could find on the occult, on parapsychology, Native American folklore. That's just what he did. And for Eyes Wide Shut, this was no different. Kubrick seems to have dug into like entire anthologies on the history of secret societies and how they operate and how the elites sort of meet up with each other. And according to his longtime assistant Anthony Freeland, in an interview given to Vulture, Kubrick consulted a researcher named G. Legman, who lived in the south of France, and Legman sent Kubrick illustrations of secret society rituals and the Black Mass, which was a satanic ceremony. He also provided extensive information on what he described as sexual mores in Vienna at the time that Schnitzler wrote his original book. Kubrick studied the work of Belgian artist named Felician Ropes, who specialized in what Freeland would call like weird erotica. And Kubrick looked into the history of one secret society in particular, the Hellfire Club, which we did a whole episode on in regards to Ben Franklin. There's a lot of really interesting stuff on that. We should probably do a specific one, specifically on Hellfire. I don't know if it's only on that. We kind of reference it.
I'll write it down.
But we should add that. Now, here's a little reality check, and I want to be very clear because this is a part where like a lot of videos will kind of go off the rails. When I say secret society, we're not talking about the modern internet meme. I'm talking about like documented secret societies. Like these are real clubs where people actually met up to actually do weird rituals and trade information. So like the Hellfire Club was a legit thing. It was founded in 1718 in London by Philip, the Duke of Wharton, and revived most famously in the mid-1700s by a British aristocrat named Francis Dashwood, who at the time was like the chancellor and the second most powerful political guy in all of Britain. And the club met in a set of man-made caves dug into the hillside, like in Buckinghamshire. And its motto, carved in stained glass above the door, was Fais ce que tu voudrais. And in French, it literally means do what thou wilt. This is the exact phrase that would be adopted almost 200 years later by the British occultist Aleister Crowley. And this is the central tenet of his religion, Thelema. Now, members of this club included a bunch of British, prime ministers and the first Lord of Admiralty and the son of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Benjamin Franklin, like I mentioned. He was very much, involved in this whole thing. But I'll be honest with you, the documented evidence for Franklin's actual involvement is like still contested historically, but a lot of people kind of accept that he was involved in some capacity. Now, the members called themselves monks. They called the prostitutes that they brought in nuns, and they performed what contemporary records would describe as obscene parodies of religious rituals. And when things started to get too public, they ordered their secretary to basically burn any type of documentation or paper trail or anything, and then 3 days later, that same secretary died. Now, one interpretation, and this is the one that fits with what we know about Kubrick and how he researches stuff, is that he was drawing from this whole documented tradition. A 300-year record of wealthy, politically connected, powerful dudes gathering in secret, putting on robes en masse, and doing a bunch of crazy sex acts, and a lot of which were kind of satanic and subversive to, the church. And Kubrick knew about the tradition. He read about it, he had illustrations, he was talking to people on the inside track that were actual scholars in this. And if that's true, if Eyes Wide Shut is pulling from this very real documented history of elite ritual behavior, which, hey, personal bias, it is, then the next question isn't just what the film shows. It's like, what is Kubrick trying to say through what he's showing? A film about secret rituals being made by a director who spent, at this point, like, probably at least a decade, maybe more, studying these societies. Like, the line between, like, research and, like, making a fun movie and the reality of what he's trying to say, all of a sudden gets a little thin. Now, the actual shooting of Eyes Wide Shut began on November 4th, 1996. And from the beginning, Kubrick didn't just direct scenes; he started to actually manipulate the people inside of them. So, of course, if you've ever seen the movie, it stars Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, a real married couple at the height of their fame, to play a fictional married couple whose relationship starts to crumble. And he did this deliberately. According to a lot of reports, he wanted to mine the reality of their marriage. He wanted that connection and their chemistry in the relationship to be real. And he directed them separately. He discouraged them from spending time together while they were on set. And when Nicole Kidman's character has a fantasy about sleeping with a naval officer, Kubrick shot the scene over 3 days on a closed set with Tom Cruise barred from entering. Think about that. Kidman has said that Kubrick wanted the scene to be, quote, almost. And he wasn't just making a movie about jealousy, he was creating actual jealousy. Think about that. Tom Cruise is sitting outside the set. He can't go on. His actual wife is in there filming a scene about this erotic dream about a naval officer. And he's just out there being like, I wonder what they're doing. I wonder, she's not actually cheating on me, right? They wouldn't do that. But think about it. He's just stewing on this, going crazy. Now, the shoot was actually planned for 3 months. It ended up taking 294 days of actual filming spread across 579 calendar days. Think about that. A year and 7 months. At the time, it was officially the longest film shoot ever. A single scene of Tom Cruise walking through a door was shot 95 times. Other scenes were shot 70 times. An actress named Vanessa Shaw was contracted for 2 weeks, and she ended up working on the film for 2 months. 2 major actors actually quit the film mid-production. Harvey Keitel, originally cast as the wealthy socialite Victor Ziegler, just walked off the set. And years later, he said that he felt that Kubrick had disrespected him. His co-star Gary Oldman would later confirm that the breaking point was Kubrick demanding dozens of takes of Keitel walking through a doorway. Around the same time, actress Jennifer Jason Leigh also left. And both of them had to have their scenes entirely reshot with new actors. And the cast wasn't just cracking from the artistic pressure. Some people say that they were breaking from some darker things at play. Now, Tom Cruise, of course, one of the most famous Scientologists in the world, was, according to one former Scientology executive, was being monitored by the church during the shoot. And this is just an allegation, so I want to be careful with how this is framed. But a former senior executive of the Church of Scientology who left the church and became a critic detailed these claims in a memoir called A Billion Years. And according to this account, Cruise began ignoring phone calls from Scientology leaders and top executives during the Eyes Wide Shut shoot. Rinder alleges that Scientology became concerned about Cruise's involvement in a film centered on cult-like rituals and sent one of their top people, a man named Marty Rathbun, to London to kind of try to liaise and work with Cruise. And in this specific memoir, there was further allegations that the church arranged to actually listen in on Nicole Kidman's phone calls through a private investigator, but again, these are purely allegations. Now, the Church of Scientology has officially denied these claims, and the people that have made these claims, like the investigator, have been controversial for years and was actually convicted on unrelated wiretapping charges. Now, the credible witness in all this has testified on the record repeatedly, but nothing here has been confirmed in any type of court. But here's what we do know for certain. During filming, Cruise developed severe ulcers and abdominal pain. And according to Nicole Kidman, they were trying to use their actual marriage for material. That's kind of how Kubrick set it up. And she said, quote, there were ideas he was interested in from their marriage. And 2 years later, after the film's release in February 2001, Cruise filed for divorce from Nicole Kidman. Their divorce was finalized shortly after, and Kidman's relationship with her 2 older children, by her own accounts, became complicated. So just back up and think about this for a sec. Kubrick cast a real married couple, arguably 2 of the most famous actors and actresses in the world, to play a fictional married couple whose marriage was being destroyed by hidden forces that they couldn't see. And by the time the movie came out, their real marriage, by Kidman's own account and by the public record, was under a strain that most people could never even get. Now, whatever it was, the stress and content of the movie seemed to have created a real psychological and relational crack between a lot of people, including the stars that would have a ton of consequences. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because I want to tell you a scary story. Yeah, specifically for the dudes, all right? Imagine you're going out with your wife, okay? You're having some dinner, you get some drinks, the vibes are good. You go back to your apartment, your house, the lights are low, you got a little Miguel playing on the radio, and all of a sudden you realize your piece is like, yeah, dude, I'm actually good. You're like, wait, what? We're ready to go. And your piece is like, nah, dude, I'm just actually gonna sit this out. I mean, you're trying everything, right? And your wife's just looking at you like, all right, we're gonna do this. You gotta be like, maybe tomorrow. Well, this doesn't have to happen anymore because let's tell you about Blue Chew Gold. Yes, because this isn't just about showing up physically, being the man that you are. It's about actually being in the moment. Blue Chew Gold's new formula combines ingredients that support blood flow and mental arousal, and that's also going to help blood flow to your brain. You'll probably be thinking of funny lines, you know what I mean? Being cool off the cuff. It's not just performance; it's connection, right? And now you're not overthinking, you're not stressed, you're just there and able to be you. Now, if this is a tablet that dissolves under your tongue, and it's really simple and discreet, you can just put it in your wallet or something. That way, you are always ready to go. And ladies, if you're listening, send your man the link. Turn him into a trophy husband. Keep him in the house. You know what I mean? A stay-at-home house husband. That's what you want, right? Give it to him and let him lay it down. All right? No awkward timing. No weird pressure. Just the confidence you really want. So discover your options right now at BlueChew.com. And we got a special deal for the listeners of this program. Yes, if you were hearing my voice right now, when you buy 2 months of Blue Chew Gold, you're going to get a third free with the promo code GAGNON. That's right, the promo code GAGNON, GAGNON. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this podcast and making this show possible. Now let's get back to it. Now, there's another creative decision that happens here that makes the whole film process very strange. And this is how it kind of comes together. So for the infamous orgy scene, the kind of the centerpiece of the entire film, Kubrick didn't just want a convincing mansion. He wanted a real mansion. He wanted the Mentmore Towers. Now, the Mentmore Towers is a 19th century mansion in Buckinghamshire, about 40 miles northwest of London. And it was built in the 1850s for Baron Mayer de Rothschild, a member of the famous Rothschild banking dynasty. And the estate stayed in the Rothschild family for over a century, but by the time that Kubrick filmed there in the 1990s, it had been sold to a different owner. And this is where we should be very careful because a lot of the Eyes Wide Shut stuff just goes crazy. But here's what we can say responsibly. Across his filmography, Kubrick consistently gravitated towards locations tied to old wealth. You know, Barry Lyndon was shot in like English manor houses. The Shining was modeled on the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. And for Eyes Wide Shut, he picked 3 different English country estates, the Mentmore Towers, Elvedon Hall, and Lutton Hoo, to create the composite Somerton mansion. And he wasn't just looking for a Rothschild connection, he was looking for the visual equivalence of aristocratic power. And if you're shooting in England in the 1990s, looking for that exact thing, half the mansions that fit the bill have connections to old banking families. I mean, that's just the history of London. Now, there's a separate story about a party that the Rothschilds threw in 1972. This famous masked ball at their French estate, the Château des Frais, organized by Baroness Marie Helene de Rothschild. It was called the Dinner of the Surrealist Ball. And the guest list included some of the most glamorous people of the time. I mean, Brigitte Bardot, Audrey Hepburn, Salvador Dali, and Marissa Berenson, every famous actor you could imagine. Now, the invitations were printed backwards. Guests even wore like these very surreal masks that were designed, like in some cases, by Dali himself. The chateau was floodlit in red so it appeared to like be on fire. There were even some photographs that are still around. I mean, could you pull up some of these pictures? Like, they're pretty weird if you look at them. You're like, this is... I mean, you can definitely see that there was some type of inspiration. I mean, this is one of the famous photos where like everything is very surreal. You see like the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world meeting up in the chateau, wearing these strange animal-type heads. It's just one of these things. Once again, it's just at the very least, it's weird. All right, here's another one. These like gold masks and just like the height of aristocracy. Like you can see this. She's got like basically like a record player on her head. It's just all very strange. And this is how the wealthy and powerful kind of got down. Now, if you look at these photographs next to the orgy scene in Eyes Wide Shut, you can see why people draw, they draw connections, right? The mask, the theatrical staging, the luxurious sort of grotesque kind of atmosphere. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning here is that there's no hard evidence that Kubrick knew about this specific ball. Like, photos of this event didn't really circulate until like the 2010s, long after Kubrick had died. Author Mike Rothschild, which ironically has no relation to the Rothschild family, makes this point in his book that basically the Rothschild family had been the target of a lot of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories for hundreds of years. And every time Western culture is kind of talking about like a wealthy dynasty, the Rothschilds get volunteered. Now, don't get me wrong, the Rothschilds probably have done some terrible stuff, but obviously not everything that's bad that's ever happened can be attributed to him, right? I think that's a pretty fair point. Now, a huge amount of the Eyes Wide Shut stuff is specifically targeting the Rothschilds, and I think a lot of that probably comes from these specific photographs. But I think the Rothschilds are probably participating in this specific event kind of in this grand sort of absurd, luxury that I think that a lot of these secret societies are tapping into. What Eyes Wide Shut is doing here isn't exposing one particular family, right? What's interesting is that when a filmmaker is trying to depict the visual culture of extreme European wealth, the mansions and the masks and all the ritual kind of grandeur, the results are showing this pattern. The fact that Kubrick didn't even know about the Rothschild party, allegedly, and the fact that they did this kind of party that really kind of looks like Eyes Wide Shut, to me is almost more credibility that he's tapping into the same source material that they perhaps were tapping into. I mean, the Hellfire Club in the 1700s, the Rothschild Ball in 1972, Kubrick's movie in 1999, these events resemble each other, not necessarily because they're, connected all by the same puppet master, but because extreme wealth performs itself the same way in private across generations. Like, extremely wealthy people want places where they can go to do whatever they want to do outside of the public eye, and people will facilitate that. And Kubrick didn't invent this visual language of wealth and elite society and all that stuff. He just synthesized it. And across centuries of different reference points, he distilled this into one piece. And what's interesting about all of this that ties Kubrick back to so many conspiracy theories is that shortly after they finished filming and the film was cut and then presented, Kubrick's story abruptly ends. So on March 1st, 1999, Stanley Kubrick delivers the final cut of Eyes Wide Shut to Warner Brothers. And the screening took place in New York at the Warner Brothers headquarters on Fifth Avenue. It was attended by Bob Daly and Terry Semel, the co-chairman of Warner Brothers, and by Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. What's interesting is that Stanley Kubrick wasn't there. He hated flying, he had fear of flying, and he hadn't been on a plane in decades. However, his longtime editor, this guy Nigel Galt, flew over from London with the print, the final film, and conducted the screening. The reaction by all accounts was extremely enthusiastic. When Galt called Kubrick afterwards to report back, Galt later said, and this is a quote, "Stanley was jubilant." In that conversation, they discussed the few remaining items to finish, some exterior establishing shots, some sound stuff, some music stuff, and that was Wednesday, March 3rd. Galt flew home to London, he had Thursday off, he saw Kubrick on Friday, and they talked about the screening response, which again was extremely positive. Everyone was stoked. That was Friday, March 5th. Stanley Kubrick died in his sleep sometime during the night of Saturday, March 6th into Sunday, March 7th in 1999. He had, according to all of the official reports, a massive heart attack at his home in Hertfordshire, England. He was 70 years old, and this was just 6 days after the screening of the final cut of Eyes Wide Shut. And let me just say, for the record, there's no credible evidence that Stanley Kubrick was murdered. He was 70 years old with a reported history of being kind of indifferent to doctors, and he just finished one of the most grueling, the tedious, agonizing productions of his entire career. His family, his editor, the collaborators, his wife, all of them said the same thing, that he went to sleep, his heart stopped, and that was it. His funeral was held 5 days later, and it was attended by about 100 people, including Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, Steven Spielberg, and the Jewish mourning prayer, the Kaddish, was recited. He was buried the very next day near his favorite tree on the estate. And that is the official story. But once you start looking at what happened to the movie after Kubrick died, you kind of see why the conspiracy theorists have a little point, okay? Because Warner Brothers immediately started to make changes. The film was contractually obligated to receive an R rating, but the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America Ratings Board, screened Eyes Wide Shut, and they said that it was NC-17. That's basically an adults-only rating. That means you know, that's basically commercial death for any film studio, right? If you get an NC-17 rating, like most movie theaters won't even show it. And the problem, according to the board, was this masked orgy scene, which is literally the pinnacle of the entire film. So Warner Brothers, with Kubrick dead and unable to object, did something pretty extraordinary for the time. They digitally inserted computer-generated cloaked figures into the orgy scene to block the view of the most explicit moments. In some shots, robed figures would just kind of appear from nowhere. In others, there would be nude women walking across the frame to obscure what's happening behind them. Nigel Galt, the editor, has confirmed that he personally authorized this and was basically the only way to deliver the contractually required R rating without actually reshooting or re-editing the final version. And the result was, basically that the entire United States had a theatrical release, the original DVD. American audiences saw a censored version, and the rest of the world got a truer cut. It wasn't until 2007 that Warner Brothers finally released the uncensored version in the United States. And this is where a new theory emerges. And this is just a rumor, I should say, but the rumor is that Warner Brothers actually cut 24 minutes of footage from Eyes Wide Shut after Kubrick's death.
Wow.
That this missing 24 minutes contains something so disturbing or so dangerous that the studio just completely buried it. In the most extreme versions of this theory, they cut footage showing a real satanic ritual, or possibly child abuse, or human sacrifice, or all of the above. And let me just say, here's what's confirmed. Nigel Galt has been unequivocal for years that no 24 minutes were ever cut. In a 2025 interview, Galt said plainly there was no Illuminati. The only changes made to Kubrick's cut were the original cloaked figures for the motion picture purposes and the addition of the exterior establishing shots and stuff like that Kubrick had already agreed to be added. Jan Harlan, Kubrick's brother-in-law and executive producer, has also confirmed the very exact same thing. Leon Vitali, Kubrick's close collaborator for decades, spent the rest of his life defending the film as Kubrick's intended work. This is actually what he wanted. There was no 24 minutes cut out. But, and this is a very important and interesting detail, in 2025, Todd Field, who played Nick Nightingale in the film and who later became a major director in his own right, gave an interview to IndieWire where he argued that what we see is still only a rough cut. He says, "What we have is Stanley's first cut. He died 6 days after screening that cut. If Stanley's post-production on past films is taken into even modest consideration, it's clear that the film would be different." Now, that's not necessarily saying that there's 24 minutes of human sacrifice that's cut out, but by these credible accounts, the movie that we're watching is not the movie that Kubrick would have ultimately released. That there's still something, perhaps, that Kubrick wanted to show that we're not seeing. So, to be clear and fair to the official record, the official account is that there's no, 24 minutes missing. There's no proven murder, no secret exposed footage, anything like that. But maybe these people are also, in fear of their lives. Maybe this is also them saying, "Hey, we just want to move on. We see what you did to Stanley Kubrick. If you could do that to Kubrick, what are you going to do to us? We're just going to all keep quiet." It's not crazy. It's very possible that's, a part of it. Now, he argues that this isn't the final version, but what he was building towards, maybe we never saw. Maybe it just would have had an additional scene, maybe another romance part. Maybe there would have been, a retake of, something innocuous. But that's just the perfection of Kubrick, and that is kind of what he's saying by this quote. Now, that doesn't change the fact that there were things that were changed afterwards to get the rating and potentially some footage missing. But again, there's no verifiable source that we can responsibly say that's not included in the film. Now, in fairness to Warner Brothers, they said that what he handed over was the final cut. That outside of changing the exterior shot, this was the final version. So to all the people that are like, well, he would have tweaked it and he would have fiddled with it, Warner Brothers says, hey, this is the final thing. And furthermore, Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise both said that the version that they saw, according to their quote, wasn't radically different from what actually premiered. So maybe that's them saving face, maybe that's them also contributing to the big cover-up, but maybe what they filmed was actually what it was. You got to think how many people worked on the film. If there was some crazy scene that got cut out, would someone have said something? Would there have been a leak somewhere? Would there have been some type of substantial evidence that we could actually hang our hat on? What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because I just want to state the obvious. You're not going to hire a chiropractor to do brain surgery. And if you're going to go fight in the octagon, you wouldn't hire a guy that watches a lot of UFC. And if you have a personal injury case, you're not going to just like hire your buddy that's good with contracts. Because you know that when you're hurt, it's because someone else was negligent. You don't want just, lawyery vibes. You want real lawyers. And that's where Morgan & Morgan comes in. They are America's largest injury law firm, with over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Crazy thing, they've recovered over $30 billion for over 500,000 clients. They've got a real track record of fighting to get people full and fair compensation. So, if you are ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan, and their fee is free unless they win. Yes, free. You literally don't pay anything unless they win your case. That's how confident Morgan & Morgan is that they can get compensation for you and your injuries. So, for more information, go to forthepeople.com/gagnon. That is forthepeople.com/GAGNON, or dial #law. That is #529, and let them know that you got sent by the people here at the campsite. Also, this is paid advertising. Now let's get back to the show.
Oh, that's not how we get back to the show. That's how I turn off my Xbox.